Hello, 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 hello. Good evening and morning and wherever else you may be. Whatever time of day it is in your location. And welcome to this dive-in session. We just got a couple of people trickling in, so we'll maybe give them a minute to arrive before we get started. Nice to see you. Lots of familiar faces and maybe a couple of new faces. Who's anybody here for the first time? Just kind of wave your hand if you're coming to this for the first time today. Hillary, yes. Hi, Hillary, you made it. Yeah, okay. Oh, and there's Clarita. Did I say that right? Clarita, welcome. Nice to see you here. Right. Okay. I think that's kind of good enough. People keep trickling in. We'll let them in. But we can start. So, there's even Susan is here. Hi, Susan. I think Michael is co-piloting tonight. So, good. So, Dive In with Dom is a public session really dedicated to the practice of inquiry. So this is part of my effort to raise awareness around this amazing practice. It is taking its place alongside mindfulness and meditation and other kinds of inner practices. So inquiry, as you know, is a way of exploring your inner world, getting to know what's going on inside you, and doing this in a very direct and immediate way by getting in touch with your experience and then exploring it to find out what's there, what's making it happen, and little by little coming to actually understand yourself, understand your experience. So these sessions are really open to the public. Anybody can come along, and we record them, we post them on YouTube. And if you are listening to this after the event, then please feel free to comment or share anything that you'd like to share on the recording on YouTube. We're going to do a short intro, and then we'll have a little teaching in which I will go into a particular topic. Each session, we cover a different angle, a different facet of inquiry. And we've been going for a couple of years, and we haven't run out of facets yet. So, so that's good. Tells you something about the richness of the practice. And then we will have a space to do a short exercise. So people will be put into a little breakout room and can do a little bit of their own exploration, because we want this to be a practical session. It's not just a theoretical talk shop. So if you're here attending it live, remember that it is being recorded. So anything that you share in the public space in the main meeting room is recorded. Anything that happens in your breakout room, if you do the exercise, which is voluntary, that's not recorded. So that's completely private and is held in confidence. Anything else I need to say by way of introduction? So one of the things about this forum is that we have people of all experience levels here. So there are people who are perhaps completely new to inquiry, and there are people who have been inquiring for a very long time. And so that's one of the rich things about it, is you get to hear from people with different levels of experience, and we can all learn from each other in different ways. So we begin, as we usually do, with a short practice and a short meditation. So I'm going to invite you to find a comfortable seat, a good position for your meditation, preferably sitting in such a way that your spine can be relaxed and upright. And as we begin, I want you to remember, see if you can find some kind of orientation or attitude of friendly interest in yourself. you're going to turn towards your inner world, towards you, your experience of yourself, your experience of your life, your consciousness, with everything that's in it, your thoughts, your feelings, your sensations. You're turning towards that. And we're doing it with an attitude, an orientation of friendly interest. Like, oh, don't know what you're going to find. Don't know what's going to be going on for you right now. But you're interested and in a friendly way. Right? So you remember that. And then sense your feet and your legs and your butt in the chair. Really connecting with the physical sensations of that part of your body. Sense your spine rising up vertebra by vertebra. Natural curve of your spine. Notice if there's any tension at the back of your neck. And if there is, see if you can just release that a little, maybe lengthen the back of your neck. And then sense over the top of your head and into your face, your eyes, your jaw, relaxing any tension there. And then inviting your focus, your attention down into your torso, sensing the rise and fall of your ribs and your belly as you breathe. And then coming to the lower belly itself, the area below your belly button. And you can cup your hands, one cupped in the other, and then both of them resting over your lower belly. And bring yourself to the sensations that are there. Sensing into whatever it is, the warmth of your hand, the movement of your belly as you breathe. Maybe you can sense it. Tingling, fullness, energy, maybe some kind of presence, maybe stillness. So just noticing whatever there is to be sensed in your lower belly. And then you're going to take a couple of minutes just hanging out with that. Letting go of everything else, the stories and the feelings and all the things going on in your environment, in your inner world. Just taking a few minutes to be close to your lower belly. And if your attention wanders off and you get caught up in thoughts or feelings, sounds in your environment, sensations in your body, just notice that and bring your focus back to sensing your belly. You can let all those other things be there. You don't have to get rid of them. But you want to be having your primary focus on your belly at the same time. And then with the next breath, you can let go of that focus. Let your awareness begin to open up. Begin sensing your arms and your legs. What are the sensations of your arms and legs? You take the time to really get in touch. Notice what you can sense there. Notice what's it like to be in touch with your arms and legs. How does that affect you? And then begin to add listening, conscious listening. So you're consciously sensing your arms and legs, and then you're consciously listening. Open to the sounds, the whole soundscape. However you experience that. And then add looking, consciously looking, including your visual sense of the environment, light, and colors, objects, textures, your whole visual field. And so now you're sensing, looking, and listening. So you're really in touch, a little more in touch with the sensate layer of your experience. What is arising in the sensory dimensions of your experience. Now include noticing your feelings. Like, how are you feeling? What kind of feeling state is here? Emotional tone. Sensing and feeling. And now I'm going to ask you a question, which I have asked you many times before. And you just hear it fresh. I say, what's up for you? What's going on with you? What is cooking for you? I could say these days or this day, this morning or this evening. What's got you engaged? What's your consciousness engaged with? Now, it might be something that's present right here. Might be a feeling or a sensation or something that's right present in your experience. And it might be something that happened a while ago. Maybe something that happened earlier today. Some event or an interaction or a conversation or some situation in your life. Some situation that's kind of up for you. And, excuse me, as you begin opening to that, you begin recognizing, oh yeah, that's really going on for me. That's really got my attention. Yeah. You probably will notice that at least in your mind, you begin talking about it. You begin describing it, or you begin bringing to mind the situation or the event. Or if it's something to do with your inner process, you might begin talking about that. Maybe you're in touch with something from your history, right? Some part of something that happened 20 years ago that's left a big impression on you. And for some reason, that's up for you. Maybe it's something from your childhood. Now, all of these elements will arise and you begin noticing them and getting in touch with them and talking about them with a story, by talking about what happened, what's going on, what's the events, even if it's your inner process, there'll be something about that. Well, it's been like this, and then it's been like that, and then that happened. Right? I've been struggling with this, whatever it might be. So there's a story there. And in today's session, we want to look a little more closely at this question of the story, at this dimension of the story, because it is something that people struggle with sometimes in their inquiry. Something that people can incorporate in a way that's useful and can incorporate in a way that's less useful. So we want to look a little at how can we engage usefully. The fact is, and this is where I think inquiry and the diamond approach differs from many forms of meditation, is that the story matters. Your stories are important. right? A story is the flow of meaning, right? It's the web of meaning that you are making around the events, the kind of unfolding of events, the way events are affecting you, the meaning that you make of it, and the understanding that you have of it. Like, this is part of the operation of your mind, right? And it's really important. It's part of your experience. Some people think that with inquiry, they need to park the story, forget about the story, just come to the immediacy of the experience, they think. So I'm just going to notice, what am I feeling right now? What am I sensing right now? I'm just going to be in the moment and forget about the story. Now, how can you understand an emotional reaction, say? Say you got hurt. Somebody said something to you and you got really hurt, right? And you're just sitting there feeling the hurt. How can you understand that hurt without the context of the story, right? It's deeply related to what happened in your life, to something that went on there, to some of those external events. You might begin to recognize that it has some connection to when you were younger. And that also arises as a story. You might recognize, oh yeah, there's some connection there. This is a familiar thing. I often end up feeling hurt in this way. That's meaningful. It's meaningful to see that this particular hurt has been happening now, and then it's kind of happened. I can recognize it all through my life, like ways that this has shown up. That's meaningful, right? That actually adds to your understanding and richness of your experience. Right? So the story really has something important to bring. Right? The story allows you to get a sense of what's involved, right? The context of the experience. Where the story becomes what people do then is that they sometimes go with just the story. Right? So people do their inquiry, they sit down to inquire and they start telling some story, right? Such and such a thing happened. They go on about the story, they tell you the story, they keep talking about the story, and then this happened and that happened, and then this, and that's connected to my mother, and my mother used to do that. And they keep going with the story, and the story keeps going, right? And you can go for a very, very long time like that. Right? You can tell that story for hours if you can find someone to listen to it, or you can tell it to your journal for as long as you like. And it doesn't become genuinely transformational. Nothing really happens. You're just kind of going over the story. So these, in a way, are the two extremes. On the one hand, we try and park the story and we think, no, I must get rid of the story because I just want to be in the moment and I'm going to feel my feelings and be with the sensations of my body. And the fact that I'm feeling this empty pit in my stomach hasn't got any connection to the story of my life. So I'm just going to inquire into the empty pit of my stomach. And in that, I miss out on seeing, oh, that empty pit showed up when I had that conversation. And that person said that to me, and suddenly I felt this empty pit. And that's revealing something about the meaning of it. Right? So on the one hand, there's that possibility. And on the other hand, there's the possibility of just telling the story. You hear people talk about getting stuck in the story. You're just stuck in storytelling, going on and on and on, right? Without it kind of going anywhere. And the main thing that you notice that's happening there that's not so useful is that there is only the story. Right? So when there is only the story, there is also something fundamentally missing. At some point, our inquiry has to go from talking about the story, including the story, fleshing out the story, to beginning to notice, okay, so as I'm talking about this, as I'm in touch with this story and bringing the story to mind, what am I feeling right now? What is happening in the moment as I am in contact with this story? How is it affecting me to bring this story up, to be talking about the story? In other words, what is the story activating within my inner world? What are the feelings? What are the sensations? What's happening in my felt sense as I'm telling this story? And doing this then begins to bring these different elements together. Right? So we come into the moment, into the immediacy of the experience with what feels relevant about the story, what's important to include and to say, with the feelings that are arising in the immediacy of our experience as we feel ourselves in the story or conscious of the story, what we begin sensing in our bodies, in our felt sense, the state of our consciousness. So as I'm talking about this, what's going on? So that is one key step that really is vital for any kind of story, right? We can't only stay at the level of the story. And on the other hand, it's not really helpful by and large for inquiry to park the story, to cut off the story, because the story has an important, is important. So sometimes you might hear diamond approach teachers or inquiry teachers saying, right, forget about the head, like park the head, just neck down, let's go there. Let's see what's happening in the feelings and in the sensations, and let your inquiry be a direct exploration of that. And I think there are two purposes to that. One is to kind of counteract the tendency, because certainly in Western culture, I think we have far more of a tendency to get stuck in the mind and the story and not to include those other elements. Right? It's far easier for us just to be blah, 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 telling the story, going into all the details of it, and not including how am I being affected in the moment as I'm with this, right? Because that's the inquiry. The inquiry is the whole thing together. So sometimes as a kind of corrective measure, somebody might say, park the story, focus on the rest of your experience. Let's find out what you can get in touch with in the immediacy. But in the full, mature, free, open inquiry, where you're just inquiring into your experience to find out what's there, you need to include all three levels, right? It really is important to include your sensate experience, to include your feeling states, and to include the meanings and the stories, the events that are connected. There are several other reasons that people can get stuck in just the story. And I'll mention two of them in particular. Or let's say where a lot of storytelling can show up that has deeper roots. So the one way that it shows up a lot is when we are having some kind of reaction, like maybe you're feeling frustrated or you're angry or you're disappointed or you feel let down. There's something like that that's gone on. You feel helpless. That's a good one. Helpless. People feel helpless about a situation. And then you sit down to inquire. And what you do is go on at length about the issue, right? So you talk about the situation. Well, this and this and this, and then they this, and and I can't believe that. And it goes on and on and on. Kind of, you might be ranting about the situation or complaining about the situation or problem solving about the situation, just trying to think about what the hell am I going to do? How am I going to manage this situation? And you can spend your whole inquiry time doing that, talking about it, complaining about it, ranting about it, going over the, rehashing it, right? And when that's happening, mostly what's not happening is contact with the feeling, right? Or contact with the sensation. So in that kind of a thing, you find yourself going on at length for a while. You might kind of stop and go, okay, so how am I actually feeling about this? Oh, I'm feeling let down. Oh, I'm feeling powerless. Oh, I'm feeling like there's something I got to fix and I don't know how to fix it. Right? So the story and the at length talking about it is actually expressing some kind of feeling that's not being felt, that isn't yet recognized. And there in your inquiry, what is so useful is to go, okay, so I'm going to just pause the story for now and let me just notice, what am I feeling? What's going on here? What am I sensing? And what I see that happens that's unfortunate in this situation is then it's easy to kind of judge the storytelling or to say, oh, that's bad or that shouldn't be going on. And that then again gets people into that dynamic of, oh, I shouldn't be, I shouldn't get into the story. But that's not necessary. What's really helpful is just to begin to recognize, oh, there are feelings here that are making that storytelling happen. And what happens if I just give some space to recognizing and feeling those feelings? Some part of me is having a difficult time here and is trying to solve it or trying to complain about it or wants somebody to listen or trying to be heard. Right? So this is very common. It's definitely something you can look out for. Another thing that can trigger a lot of going into stories and often dredging up the past and starting to talk about anything else, is when you really sense in and you find there's not much there. And so when you're inquiring and you get to a place where there's some kind of emptiness, there's nothing really happening, no real feelings, reactions have kind of settled down and gone away. Don't really know, you can't really tell anything, right? And this is a moment where people kind of hang with that for a few seconds, and then they kind of scramble back to safe ground and start talking about something else. Bring in some other story. Start talking about even some other aspect of the situation that they were just inquiring into, or the issue they were just inquiring into, but it's like they try and bring it back in and keep talking about it, because that moment of there's nothing really here is so unfamiliar, feels a bit disconcerting. You don't really know what to do there. And it's like, let me just haul out find my way back to safe ground and start talking about that. And so that's a moment, if you catch yourself doing that, that's a moment to kind of see if you can pause and go, well, okay, what if I don't take myself back there? What if I don't try and dig out that story again? But let me just stay here with the not much. Not much feeling, not much sensation, no real thoughts on my mind. And if you just breathe and hang out and just see what that's like. If you don't have to fill up that space or that emptiness with talking about something that when you really look at it, doesn't have any substance, isn't actually kind of relating to anything that's directly going on in your experience right there. And again, it's a common thing. Common thing. People work, I see it, people like working on some issue and they get in touch with the inner child and their mother and all these feelings and hurt and God knows what else, right? And it opens up. And then at some point, they start talking about it again. And you're like, this doesn't feel very juicy. It doesn't feel like there's really much going on here. You check and see, like, well, do you feel like a child right now? No. Okay. Are you feeling like, are you feeling frustrated? No, not really. Okay. So what if we just hang with that? Just stay with the not much. Yeah. As unfamiliar as it is. And that, of course, is really the opening, one of the openings into the whole dimension of inner spaciousness that often the familiar mind doesn't know how to deal with. And so it tries to fill it up with stories and ideas rather than just hanging out in the nothingness. Yeah, so what's your story with stories? What is your story with stories? How do you include stories in your inquiry? Do you think the meaning and the story and the detail of what's happening in your life is important? Does your inner process seem to happen completely in a bubble that's got nothing to do with the story of your life? Some people's work is like that, seems like that for a while. They're all just kind of in their little bubble, not seeing the connections between what's happening and their lives. Are you interested in your story? Kind of friendly and interested in it without being totally swept away by it? Do you balance your story by including the feelings, the sensations that are arising as you bring it to light, as you articulate? But those are some things you might like to contemplate a little for yourself and see what you find. Yeah. So I'm going to invite you to do a little exercise. So only if you want to do it. If you don't want to do it, you're welcome not to. If you don't want to do the exercise, I would suggest you drop off now and rejoin in about 15 minutes because somebody's gonna, yeah, Hillary, you said you were going to do that. Sure. See you soon. Welcome. Because somebody is going to put you, Michael probably put you into a breakout room, and we don't want people to get stuck in a breakout room without a partner if you then disappear. So you'll be in groups of 3, and you'll each just have 5 minutes, right? 5 minutes to just look into how do you include stories in your inquiry, right? How do And if this is even your first time here and you haven't done any inquiry before, like, how do you think about your stories, the stories of your life? And how do you see them as being connected with your feelings and your sensations? How does all that work for you? So you want to take a little time to look into that for yourself and just see what you see. So there are going to be 3 of you. You'll each have 5 minutes. And somebody who's not talking, the person who's not doing the monologue, can time it. And the other two people, just a reminder, are completely neutral witnesses. So you don't say anything, you don't react, you don't want to interrupt the person or tell them, no, no, you're doing it wrong. You don't want to do any of that. You just want to be present and listen. Listen to their story about stories. And as you tell your story about stories and you look into it, notice how you're feeling, right? So before you kind of end off, notice what happens if you include how you're feeling and sort of what you're sensing as you look into your how you are with stories, as you explore your relationship to stories, to your story. Okay, see you in, we'll say about 17 minutes odd. So let's be back here at about 1:30 to carry on with Q&C. So you have a few minutes just to say hello to one another, maybe just after 1:30. We'll set the timer and see you in a bit. Yeah, I'm curious what you learned. How is it to look into how you are with stories and your relationship to stories? What did you find? Yeah, Gail, you got your hand up there. If you want to ask a question, if you can raise your electronic hand, that's helpful. Make sure we see you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, I've been in this work for 8.5 years,
Uh-huh.
and I started out for like 6 years. I was completely so deeply into my head that I was
Mm.
totally detached from my body.
Right.
For example, the last 2 years, I've been trying to um, become familiar with my body and open to it.
Mm.
But what happens is, a lot of times I do have that experience of um, feeling nothing. And
Mm.
then I get anxious when and I feel like also I should be talking all the time.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes it really feels good just to sit and just feel into myself. But
I,
but anyway, I've gone through a transition now where I really find that my inquiries are more valuable if I do them completely from my body
mm-hmm.
because I learned something new.
Wonderful.
Something arises that I don't didn't never knew was there. So try to keep my head from getting in here because if I do it completely from my head, I feel like I've wasted my time because I didn't learn it.
Very good, Gail. So I think I mean, that sounds really good. And what you're noticing is what helps you to learn something new. So that's great. You're kind of tuned into that, and you can see that when you're attending to the immediacy of your experience and your body, right, you learn something new. The
Right,
line I want to underline to kind of put a ring around is you said, when I do it completely from my head. And it's the completely that I want to put a ring around, right?
right,
So,
right.
what will be an interesting experiment for you is to kind of see what happens if you kind of say something about the story or the meaning, like maybe talk about it for like a minute or a couple of sentences.
I
And
think
then
I
you
did
can
that.
say, okay, so what am I sensing in my body now?
Mhm.
Right? And then give that time and give yourself the time and space to kind of play with including both of those dimensions. Yeah.
And then I just have one more quick question. And that
Yeah.
when you're doing from your body, I have a tendency to want to analyze what I'm doing. You know,
Right.
I feel this way because of that.
Uh-huh.
And isn't it better not to try to look for any explanation?
Well, again, this is one of the very kind of subtle things about our mind and our understanding. Because on the one hand, in inquiry, you do want to understand your experience, right? That's what we're trying to do, want to understand it. But there is a difference between understanding it by seeing the meanings and the connections and understanding it by having an explanation, right? So the part of you that wants to analyze it and explain it, what you want to do is bring along that part of you and you say, okay, well, I'm feeling this, and there'll be a tendency to try and explain it. And if you instead kind of go, I wonder what's making this happen, right? Why is this here? So that the why is not a mental explanation or a story, but you're inviting your experience to show you what else is going on there that is related to what you've already seen.
Thank
Do
you
you get
so
the
much.
difference?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And one last thing I want to say to you, just because you said it so beautifully earlier, that thing of thinking you have to keep talking, right? So again, I would really invite you to take the time. Like, what's it like to just be with your experience, to be able to not have to say anything for a bit, yeah? And then see what you could say, right? So you hang out with it, you give it a little time. You're like, well, I feel not much. It's like not much feeling. Oh, I noticed like the not much feels quiet. So then if I just let that happen, oh, the quietness actually feels good. There's something nice about it. But it's kind of empty. And then I realize I start looking for something else to say. So do you see what I'm doing? You're just kind of hanging out with it and
Yes.
noticing what happens as you do, as opposed to having to keep talking or, coming up with something.
Thank you so much.
Those are my tips. You're welcome. Welcome, Gail. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, Caroline.
Hey there.
Hi.
As I shared with my partner, my feelings about my stories is I've been kind of in and out of therapy, conventional therapy, for probably the better part of 40 years. And all of that has been just telling the damn story.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a part of me, and as you say, just you sit in this story, it's not transformational.
Mm.
It helped me to understand. There was no value to the therapy.
Mm.
There was, but I didn't feel healed or any kind of healing. And so there's a little part of me that says, when I go into inquiry, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the story because I'm sick of the fucking stories,
Yeah.
And it kind of, and it,
Yeah.
so I found that kind of interesting, because when I sat there, I thought, I don't want to tell stories. I mean, I tell it in the framework just to kind of give context in the inquiry, but after that, can we just like move on?
Right. Absolutely. And to be clear, those kind of stories you actually don't have to tell, right? You're very welcome to just park those kind of stories, right? So you can tell a story. So I guess this is another great distinction that you're helping bring out, is that you want to tell the story to the extent that it feels alive, that it is actually something going on in your experience. Because just like the feeling is something that is really there, when the story is alive, it's really there, right? And what that'll be is like you're feeling you're having a reaction, right? It's like something going on in your life. And you tell the story of what happens, and it has an impact, right? You will actually feel something. You'll start sensing something. It comes alive in you because it is actually alive. And the historical stuff, mostly that comes alive because you'll be inquiring and suddenly you recognize, oh, I'm in touch with something young here. Not because I'm going, oh, my mother used to XYZ. No, 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 no. You'll be right there in touch with that little young part of you who's feeling exactly what's going on with your mother. And then the story is literally live right there in your experience. It's not a disconnected story. It is the meaning of what is arising right there as it's happening. Yeah. And that's a whole kind of story.
No, I see what you're saying. Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 Thank you.
So
Thank
those
you.
you want to include. But yeah, you can park the, oh, I'm just going to rehash my whole history with my parents yet again. Nah, you don't need to do
Thank God. I'm done.
that.
Thank you, Dom.
Yeah, you're welcome, Caroline. Good to see you. And then Che.
Hi, Dom.
Hi.
So, God, this is such an important topic for me, a supplement to the diamond approach, because you're really getting into the minutia about storytelling.
Mm.
In my inquiry, I noticed that I have this assumption about storytelling. I've always envied people who are not storytellers. I think that they're deeper, they're better students, what have you. And the second part, that place of being unknown. I mean, I've been there, and I do notice sometimes that discomfort, and sometimes, especially in private sessions, I feel like when it's blank, like I'm not getting my money's worth, it's like blank space.
Paid all this money and I'm getting nothing.
There's like, you want to fill it with something.
Okay.
But I'm curious, I know that Hamid and someone else, they were teaching something online about instincts and primal stuff before concepts come in. This uncomfortable feeling about wanting to fill the space, is there something much more foundational that's in play with this?
Do you have a sense of it as you're talking about it now?
Um,
What's the discomfort that shows up?
I have a sense of it because it feels so powerful to want to feel it.
Okay.
That I'm wondering if there's any association that's not about maybe my history or just you call the unfamiliar self.
So just talk about, just say more. What's so powerful? What do you sense in your body as you talk about it?
Yeah, I'm going to use a description, but there's a kind of a buzziness, like a postpartum kind of a, like you have a party and then the guests go and the room's empty, but you still feel the buzz.
Okay.
And you feel kind of like, oh, something's over, but you still wish it was still here or something.
Okay. So what if you just sense right now, sense the buzz and the emptiness together? They're kind of both here. Something's gone, something's missing, and there's this buzz. If you let that happen. Take a few breaths. See what else you can say about it.
I think I never let just it both being here. I think I always felt like, oh, they're both here and it's uncomfortable, or there's this agitation. But somehow when you just said, can they both just be here? It almost just kind of felt like everything kind of, I don't know, it just kind of, downward.
Okay. So let that happen. Yeah. So if you don't, it may not be your favorite experience, might be a bit uncomfortable, but you just kind of let it happen.
Yeah. I mean, it really feels very neutral. I don't have anything to say about the buzz or the emptiness, it just.
So you feel very neutral. You have any feelings, like any emotional kind of tone?
No,
Nothing. No
I don't
feelings.
ever let it get that far. I think it's just in my head, like, oh, it's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is look what an interesting state there is here. There's like no feeling.
Yeah.
Maybe you kind of feel that neutral, Just what's it like to just be neutral?
It it just feels it's the next thing. It just feels appropriate. Like, oh, this is what's here now.
What's what here?
Yeah.
Neutral. You still feel buzzy?
Not really.
Okay, well, the buzziness is gone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the emptiness doesn't have that feeling of like depressed, like
Uh-huh.
doesn't have a, yeah.
So that's why usually there's like some association or some sense of it kind of being depressed. But seems like as you allow it and you kind of land in it, it's not exactly depressed.
Yeah.
Depressed.
Yeah.
Just kind of not much.
I don't think I ever went into it like this. I just kind of held it in a conceptual way and
Right. Beautiful.
felt the effect of it.
Yeah. Right. So you see, actually, what you're entering into here, this is a whole experience to, and again, you want to not just kind of get up and walk off and go, oh, okay, well, that was that, right? But it's something to be really curious about, like, oh, okay. So if I just kind of hang out with this not muchness, right? I just let it happen, sense it in my body, notice how it affects me, just kind of hang out here. You see how it's already unfolding. Right? It will continue unfolding. We have to be as interested in the nothingnesses as in all the somethings. Yeah.
Thank you, Don.
Great. Thanks for that. Susan.
Yeah, thanks for this topic, Dom. I can also relate to everything everyone said. I guess there's just two comments I wanted to make and see if you had something to add. One is that I'm not much of a big storyteller, but I'm definitely analysis, junkie. And so I think analysis is my escape hatch. But the other one is reactivity. It was so interesting when you said reactivity is a sign something wants to be felt. And I've just done a little inquiry into my reactivity since you said that. And it feels like a very automated firewall that comes in when my unconscious psyche thinks there's some dangerous feeling, right? And the reactivity comes in to say, okay, we're going to block the feeling and just have reactivity. And so I guess both these things, the over analysis and the reactivity, it's like, oh, I see these are kind of like they've been little life preservers for me. It's like these what feel like anchors to keep me, I don't know, whatever, stable or something.
Right.
So it's trippy to think about letting go of them and getting into the emptiness. It's like, wow.
Right. That is trippy. It is a thing. And I want to say again, I keep going on about this, but if you think about think of it less in terms of letting go of them and more in terms of just continuing to inquire into them. So it's like, oh, I notice that I'm getting reactive because there's some part of me feels there's some kind of danger. I mean, just in that, there's so much to discover there. Like, oh, what is the part of me that feels this?
Right.
What if I kind of get interested in there's some part of me that's kind of freaking out because there's danger. Well, what is that? That's something to find out. What's it freaking out about? There's a bit of a story there, like something to discover. What is the thing that it's freaking out about and how come? Right? So the inquiry can just continue, right? You just continue inquiring. You don't have to let go of anything. In the process, as you unpack that and open that up and go through whatever you go through with it, probably the pattern will dissolve by itself, right? You don't have to do anything. You won't have to decide, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. It just won't happen anymore.
Right. So it's just that first step of not just being lost in it, right?
Yeah,
but actually
exactly. That's the catch. That's what we got to catch.
Yeah.
Exactly. We've got to catch that moment of waking up and going, oh, I'm coming from a reaction. Let me see what's the reaction. Then we can turn the eye around and look at the reaction.
Right.
Because usually when we're caught in the reaction, and this is a thing just for years and years. I mean, anyway, I don't know about forever, but when we're caught in the identification and in the reaction, we're just going with it and we believe it. It just feels like, yeah, that's what I got to do, right? And that the art of inquiry becomes more and more about catching that moment. It's like you catch that moment and you go, oh, okay, no, this right here, this is the thing I got to look at, right? This is what I got to feel into and bring into the mind.
Well, what you said about reactivity is a sign something wants to be felt. It's like the hook. It's like helped me remember, right? It's like a little hook in so that I don't just go off to the races with.
Yeah.
Because in reactivity, yeah, it feels very natural. It feels like there's nothing else to do because there's nothing else in the room. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing else happening when you just go with it. And so something has to kind of little interpose itself just a tad.
Exactly. And that comes from a combination of your presence, right? So the more present you are, the more better the chances you'll catch it, because you'll notice, okay, I'm feeling a little charged here, or there's something going on. And, I think in a certain way, like having these little pointers, like at a forum like that, just the fact that it's been mentioned once and you kind of heard it at some point, you go, oh, yeah, okay, hang on, let me.
Right.
That can be handy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Susan. You're welcome. Good. And then Clarita.
Let me get a sound here. Okay.
There you go. You sound good.
Yep. So it's just I'm going to narrate what happens in my inquiries, and I would like your observation about it. Actually, I do not go for stories, but they come. My focus is what's happening right now, because I do that every day, and about an hour and a half, the inquiry. So it's a session, it's a practice session I do actually, and since threads are being formed and things come back, I use those to access my history, and then the stories come from my history, and not from things that came in my daily life, things that may have triggered something. I try to do that sometimes, but I don't have the skill to do it. At the same time, it's happening.
Sure.
So, but I think it's possible to have it. But
I think it's possible to do that. I mean, a little aside just on that piece. I mean, that's exactly where the story becomes useful, right? Because you go about your life, you're living your life, and something happens. Maybe you're very busy with it and you can't, really deeply inquire into it in the moment. So then you go back home, and later that day or later that week, you tell the story, right? And as you tell the story about it, possibly sometimes those feelings start coming alive in you again. And then you got something right there in your immediate experience to explore. So the story can help you reconnect with events or with experiences that aren't just what's happening right here and now. Right? That's a wonderful use of it. But if you tell the story and then you feel into yourself and you're like, well, nothing really happens, I don't really connect with anything, then maybe that story hasn't got any juice in that moment.
That's good. That's Thank you.
Oh, well, so that was one piece. I don't know if you got to your.
No, that was it, actually.
Oh, that was it. Okay, that piece. Yeah.
It was, yes, because my stories are history.
Yes.
Actually, are just history, and I never really go after things that get me hooked during the day, or
Right.
But then what you said is perfect, because
that's exactly it. Yeah, exactly. So But as you begin your inquiry, tell the story. What happened? What got you hooked? How come it got you hooked? What was the hook? Like, you can go into it really in a lot of detail. And as you do that, be in touch with your feelings, with your sensations, and talk about those. And that will then keep the whole thing live and in the moment. And at some point, you go from inquiring about just what's out there, you kind of go, okay, now I know what's going on out there. Now let's really see how come what's going on in here, and how come this is happening in here. And then you begin going deeper.
The thing is that since I'm following a thread, and it seems that every time I do the daily inquiry, the same thread comes along, the same feeling. For example, now I'm just with this hurt, and it's still getting, it's still many things are happening there.
Yes.
So then I don't feel, the stimulus to
Beautiful.
bring something.
Yeah, so
okay.
that's fine too. That's very fine too. You may just notice at some point that, the things that are going on in your inner process will tend to get reflected and refracted into your daily life. Like, that can happen. It doesn't have to. You don't have to go looking for something that's not there. If you're deep into a process like that, that sounds wonderful too. But we have all these possibilities.
That's perfect.
All right, you're welcome. Great.
Thank
you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Clarita. So thanks, everyone. I think that kind of brings us to our time. Michael has put a few links for you in the chat. So you have the divein.life website. We post all of these on the YouTube channel. So if you'd like to subscribe or follow on YouTube, that would be great. Feel free to post comments. Feel free to let other people know about them. Like, you can go and have a look at some of the past recordings and past topics that we've covered. There's, I think it's about 2 years worth by now. So the library is slowly growing. And thank you for coming along and sharing your love of this wonderful practice. And until next month, I wish you rich explorations. So enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominic.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This is so useful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Dom.